Welcome in the latest episode of that SEC podcast. I'm your host, Michael Bratton. Go by SEC Mike on Twitter. And again, flying solo, cousin Shane getting some rest and relaxation. Not really. He's spending time with the family. He's doing his actual job. But we have an absolutely loaded show here as our SEC Media Days Rewind continues. I'm basically just going to do it just like the event. So we're going to hit on some Texas A&M, some LSU, some Missouri. We got coach comments, and we got tons of interviews to get to. This episode, we're going to feature our Cole Cubelic interview from Jocks, SEC Network, ESPN, The Cube Show. I mean, the guy is a freaking animal there. He does everything covering the SEC, so really appreciate Cole spending some time with us. First time on the show. We'll get to that in a minute. Jesse Simonton from On 3, he's blowing up. He's featured on the new Andy Staples show over at On 3. Covers the entire SEC. Really great stuff here from Jesse. And a Billy Liucci interview. First time in a while we've had Billy on. He went on a deep dive on A&M, so love that. Jarod Hamilton, Power, Mizzou. Like I said, this show's absolutely loaded, so let's get right into it. Just one little news item we had here on Monday. Wanted to make note of this, but if you missed it, College Game Day is headed to Charlotte, North Carolina for South Carolina versus North Carolina in the season opener, and it's a very surprising decision. I thought it was interesting. We were speaking to Paul Feinbaum down at Media Days, and he had told me that was one that SEC Nation considered. If you missed the news, SEC Nation is going to be week 1 in Nashville for Virginia versus Tennessee on a neutral field. So as soon as I heard that, I was like, that can't be right. That's over the North Carolina, South Carolina game. But now it makes sense with College Game Day covering the game. That's one hell of a game. North Carolina, they're the point spread favorite. I know that doesn't mean much for on the field or anything, but that has surprised us since it debuted, and it's going to add a little hype. Spencer Rattler versus Drake May in that big showcase game. People are tuning in, man. They want to watch what Shane Beamer and company got. Mac Brown. Of course, these two met in a bowl game 2 seasons ago. South Carolina won that one. They're going to win this opener here with College Game Day in tow. So I just thought that was interesting. Interesting selection there. Neutral site matchup, but adds a little fuel to this South Carolina, North Carolina season opener. All right, so keeping these interviews at the front, all SECs, try to hit on as many teams as we can. So first interview, let's kick it over. Cole Cubelic, ESPN, SEC Network, Jocks. You know Cole. Come on now, former Auburn lineman, talking all thing SEC with me and cousin Shane.
What do we got here?
Was that the
Jocko fuel, yeah.
Doc Savage?
My brother says it's healthier than Diet Dew, so I'm trying it out. I think I've lost 3 pounds since I started drinking it.
There you go. There you go.
All right, we're pleased to be joined by Cole Cubelic, SEC Network,
Yep.
Jocks. I mean, how many titles you got right now?
Just one. Tired. It's the only title I have right now. Listen, it's fun. I love working with McElroy on Jocks every morning. Got the Cube Show podcast, at Cube Show 61 on YouTube. Hit that one up. Trying to catch up with you guys on subscribers. We'll get there one day, maybe, probably not. And then obviously doing games and everything. It's cool, man. I can't complain. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Fortunate.
We went to dinner last night with Pat Smith. I don't you know him
Pat's
well.
the best, yeah.
Yeah, he was great, man. He was talking your praises up there at Jocks, so I know you're doing well. What
was he saying? He thinks I'm good?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it's a long
He
list.
tells me I'm terrible.
Feels like your coach back in the day.
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, there'd be more expletives in there if what my coach had to say. I tell people all the time, we talk about these kids today. Like, I was coached by Rick Trick at first and then Hugh Nall. And Rick Trickett called me the dumbest motherfucker he had ever coached every day for like 2 years. And it's at some point, what's weird is like at some point you kind of start believing it. You're like, well, he has told me that for 3 straight months. Like maybe I am. Like maybe I just can't learn these plays, you know?
Yeah.
So
my coach said I was slower in smoke off cow manure. So I've never seen smoke off cow manure, but I would imagine it's extremely slow.
There's nothing better than those old like country sayings like that. You know, like and he used to say, well, I probably can't say that one, but he said, you know, I grew up in Homewood, which is I live there now. It's an amazing place, a suburb of Birmingham. And he used to say, you know, there's nothing but something in steers from Homewood. You know that, right? And I was like, there's actually not even steers in Homewood, man. Like, what are you talking about? have you been? Like, this is not the middle of nowhere. But yeah, that's awesome. People try to make sayings applicable to every place, and it's like, buddy, it doesn't work that way. It's not it.
During your playing careers, I've always wanted to. I like to ask ex-players this: who's the best lineman you went up against?
Oh man, there were so many. I played against Jarod Warren at Florida. He was a tilt nose, so that was in an odd front, 5-man front. That was essentially me on every play, me and him. He was the 3rd pick in the draft out of Florida. Played against Cornelius Griffin at Alabama, who played for the Redskins for a while. He was really good. I mean, the toughest in and of itself, and it wasn't individual, was Georgia because they had Richard Seymour, Marcus Stroud, Charles Grant. They had Boss Bailey, and then they had the defensive rookie of the year playing off-the-ball linebacker, Kendrell Bell, who led the league in sacks as a rookie for the Steelers, who was by far the hardest I've ever been hit in my life. We run a little inside zone. I'm scooping off. Guards helping me. And Kendrell Bell had no regard for where the play was going. He was just going to put his face mask in your chin and try to hurt you on every play. And I'm trying to fight off Marcus Stroud, who's a first-round pick in his own right. And here comes Kendrell Bell, just whop! And it's, you know, chin straps unbuckled. You're kind of wondering where you are. You're getting up, and you're like, God almighty. And we went for like 7 yards. Like Heath Evans was our tailback at the time, and like he goes, and I was like, well, that's great, but I mean, damn. It's like the ball's like you almost want him to make the tackle. Like, hey, bro, don't do that to me again. Like tackle him. Hardest I've ever been hit. There was a bunch though, man. Like,
did you go back like when you heard the word concussion? Because that wasn't a word growing up when I was in school.
Oh, no, you were soft.
Stinger. Yeah, absolutely. But when you discovered that word, you were like, oh yeah, that's what that was.
That's Actually, I think
that
more
makes sense.
I think more about it now, especially with all these transfers. When I'm like, that guy from Louisiana Tech, yeah, like I can't remember his name. I have no idea. There's so many names we have to remember. It's like,
you give everybody nicknames, you know.
Yeah, old buddy from Northern Illinois. Yeah. You know, my guy from Temple. Yeah, that guy.
The dudes. That's usually what I say. They got some good dudes there.
If these people get mad in their comments and everything, folks, you can't remember all these names. It's literally not possible.
Right.
Like, I mean,
if you mispronounce a name, they'll get on your ass.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, my guy's name's Cubelic, so that's fine. Gary Danielson called me Cubelic earlier on my show. And I'm like, it's McElroy and Cubelic. Like, come on, man. It's fine.
One of my favorite things about your account is you're looking at film, what have you, and you tweet out all these highlight clips. I mean, how much time does it take you to find these plays? Because you find some gems on there.
Well, it's funny because we were doing SiriusXM yesterday, and our boss, Michael Mazvinsky, we go to break, and he comes up and he said, "You're a lunatic." And I was like, what are you talking about? He said, "Are you literally watching film while we're interviewing SEC coaches doing a radio show?" And I was like, well, I mean, I got it on. I'm not locked into it, but it's there in case, you know, I can kind of peek over and see some plays. When I first got married, I mean, my wife couldn't believe it. I would come home, and I'd be watching film when she got home. We would go work out, eat dinner, do our thing, and then I would say, I'm going to go downstairs and watch some more film. And she's like, what? Like, how much of this can you watch? And I'm like, well, it's endless. Like, I could just keep going. There's so much I haven't seen. So I just try to get it in whenever I can. And it's now that I have 3 kids, it's literally like squeeze it in, get it in when you can fit it in. Like 10 minutes here, 30 minutes here, an hour here. If I'm on the plane, I'm watching it. And when Greg and I do our show in the morning, I've always got my iPad going on something because I might see something like out of the corner of my eye at some point. So I can't lock into it for a lengthy period of times anymore like I once could. But I mean, after the show, I try to get a quick 30-minute grind in almost every day. So you got to at least just explore every day is what I try to do. And that way you never truly get behind. Once the season hits, you're never catching up. I don't care if it's week 0, week 1. Like, you're not catching up. Because if I get through you guys know what I do on Sunday. The reason I started the podcast, I watch all the SEC games. We go through the film, X's and O's, what happened. Well, do I want to go see what Ohio State's doing? Do I want to go see what USC's doing? Like, well, I got to go look at Washington's offensive line. Okay, I want to see what Miami's doing. You can't just blast through all of it. It's literally impossible. So you got to pick and choose. But I just honestly, the only way I know how to answer that is I get in as much as I can. And some days that's an hour. Some days I might get lucky it's 3 hours. Some day it might be 5 minutes. But it's just I'm always trying to take a peek whenever it's possible.
Absolutely. Well, I'm a huge fan of the show. I'm also a huge fan of you on the sideline and breaking down some of this film study. But I got to ask, has there ever been a moment you thought, I should be coaching? Have you ever thought about that? I mean, just because of the way your brain works.
Well, the guy that I referenced that called me the dumbest MF, he kind of ruined the coaching thing for me. But here's what's weird about it. It's very similar to media.
Yeah.
So I get all these kids that are coming out of college, and they say, hey, I want to do what you do. I'm like, all right, cool, I'll be glad to help. And the first thing I ask them is, what is your acceptable floor in this industry? And they all look at me like I'm crazy because the typical answer is, okay, I want to be Aaron Andrews or Kirk Herbstreit. And they're like, that's really cool, but there's one of those, right? I mean, chances of us getting there are pretty much zero. Are you okay being local news sports person? Are you okay just having your own podcast? Because you can do a whole nother full-time job and have a podcast, and that can be great. Or you can dump everything into a podcast like you guys know. I mean, this can go a lot of different ways. You okay just having a radio show? Like, I need to know what is the floor that you're fine with. And that usually dictates, all right, you should probably go for this or get out of this. When I had somebody last week, and she came to me and asked me about it, and she said, I want to do sideline for the SEC network. And I was like, all right, cool. Whose job are you taking? Because they're not just open. Like they're not just looking to fill voids. They're not sitting around. So who are you bumping?
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you right now, it ain't me.
Yeah.
So who else are you going to bump? And they kind of get wide-eyed at that point. It's like you maybe go try this, then try a little bit of that, and then do this. When I came out, there were no podcasts. Right. There wasn't a dedicated website for every team or for every team. There wasn't online coverage wasn't real. It was like you had your 3 local news sports guys.
Yeah.
You had your one radio station that maybe had 2-3 local guys, and 2 or 3 football games were on TV.
Right.
Like, calling games felt unattainable to me when I got out of college.
Right.
Literally, it did, because Jefferson Pilot and then CBS and ESPN. Like, that was it.
Yeah.
And so I didn't think it was possible. And it's kind of the same thing in coaching. When I got out of school, I mean, you were going to be a GA for years.
Yeah.
Making 12, 17, 19,000. And some of the guys, like, I remember Will Muschamp was a GA at Auburn when I was there. And I think he just got, like, his graduate school paid for and got to live in the dorm. Yeah. Like, that was all he got. So that was what that life was then. Now, I mean, they're taking flyers on anybody to come coach. Like, oh, you've been an analyst for a while? Cool. Do you want to make $700 to come coach quarterbacks? Like, sure. I would love to just coach. Yeah. Would I like the schedule that these guys have? No. NIL, portal, recruiting your own roster every day, the regular recruiting portion of it, the travel. I got 3 kids, too, so it's not really a fair question. Like, I would never leave what I do now to put that on my family because I know how extensive it is. But I would love to just coach the game. Yeah. Absolutely. And you know what's crazy is I used to say, somebody asked me this, I said this yesterday. I used to say, you know what, if the money was the same, I'd love to coach in high school. Well, it's the same shit now. These kids are getting NIL. They're transferring.
Yeah.
Like, they're moving their families across town to go play at a different school. It's crazier in high school than it is in college.
Absolutely. And small town politics don't help.
Nuts.
Yeah, and you do have a dream job, getting to cover the
multiple.
SEC. Well, multiple. But
like, seriously, I listened to WJOX driving to high school in the mornings.
Really?
I was that sick kid I listened to sports talk radio, and there was a beep. It was like my apartment complex. When you came out, there was a BP station, and then, like, across the street was the road to go to the high school. I would go to the BP station, pay 50 cents and get a USA Today every day. I'd go to school. Everybody else was trying to finish their homework. Not that mine was done. I just kind of didn't care. And I would open up and start looking at box scores. Or I would start looking at, articles, who was playing who, schedules, different things. Like every sport, I would literally open it, and the green section was the money section, purple section was the life section, and the front page, I'd throw those away. Red, sports, that's all I cared about. Yeah. So I listened to Sports Talk Radio, the station I'm on now. I listened to that station. And then my wife reminds me all the time, because when Tom and Jordan and I first got put together, I said, man, this is something I could do for a decade. When we were talking about it, I said, if I can get that, I'll do it for 10 years and be happy. Well, like anybody else, 3-4 years in, I'm like, man, what if we got that game? What if I could go do this? She's like, remember, you said you would do this for a decade. She's like, so don't start getting greedy. She puts me in my place. So I have more than one dream job, man. Like it's really cool.
Well, the one I was specifically referencing, though, is getting to be on these SEC campuses Saturday night, because that's the game every fan base wants. They want the Saturday night game, and because of TV, we don't always get the Saturday night game. But wherever you're going, unlike fans of, say, Arkansas, Tennessee, that doesn't get it every night, you do, because you're there, you're living these environments. I mean, I just can't imagine what that's like week in and week out, because everyone claims they have a top 10 experience, and several have earned that in the SEC, but the venues you get to go in, I mean, it's like the best time to go to. It's all amazing. Of them.
And after probably week 2 or 3, then they're all conference games. Mm-hmm. So it might not be Alabama, LSU, but Kentucky, Mississippi State, or Auburn, Ole Miss, or Ole Miss, Tennessee, they're going to be damn good. And these venues, none of them are bad. They're just they're all fun. Like the podcast a couple weeks ago, I did toughest places to win right now, which is
everyone agreed.
It's different.
Everyone agreed with you.
Oh, of course. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But it's always going to be a sliding scale, because I played in Knoxville the year after they won a national championship. It's still the loudest stadium I've ever heard, ever. And now with what they've redone in there, with the LEDs and the T coming out and the spotlight, I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
You get down to Gainesville, when they're rocking, you can't hear a thing.
Yeah. And
it's very unique, because the student section was grandfathered in, and we were on the far side of the bench. It's literally where we are, the student section to the players.
Yeah.
Like you're sitting against the back of your bench, and they're right there. And you can imagine the things they're saying when you come off the field, especially if it's not going well.
Yeah.
I mean, they're having fun. And I never got the other side of it, but I've had guys like McElroy. Like Trevor Knight told me Auburn was the most difficult place I ever played, Big 12 or SEC. Auburn at night was the toughest place I ever played. Athens is loud. Baton Rouge is a whole other animal, man. Like that thing. See, the thing about Baton Rouge is not just the noise. It's the all-encompassing voodoo, mystique. The odor of that place is awesome. Like you get out of your car in the parking lot and it just smells like gumbo. Like it's incredible. And everybody's yelling in purple wigs, and it's just you walk by a live tiger on your way into the stadium. And what's really nuts is the first time I went there in '97 was when they still wheeled the tiger around in the cage like they do the pig at Arkansas right now. And I'll never forget, I ran out and I'm jogging, and I'm like, that's a fucking tiger in a cage at a football game. Like you never believed it until you saw it. I saw it on TV, but it's like, is the tiger really out there where we can just see it? And and they would rattle his cage to try to get him going when we ran out. It was wild. And then you get to Arkansas, and it's like there's a 500-pound pig in its cage, and they're giving him carrots. That's a real thing. And like Fayetteville's a perfect example. When they get that pig suey, it's awesome, man. I don't care who you root for, or if they're good, if they're not good. Like you feel the passion there, and what they've done with the third deck and all the new floor level, grass level seats. That's an amazing place. And I said on the podcast, we can't say Williams-Brice is the most underrated place anymore.
Yeah.
That's the same as the people that still say that soccer and NASCAR are the fastest growing sports in America. You can't be the fastest growing sport for 20 years. At some point you've just grown.
Yeah.
It's just a tough place to play.
Yeah.
I think Lexington's the most underrated place right now. It's a really cool environment. They really upgraded it. It's much nicer than it used to be. Like I said, depending on who's good, it's probably, Tennessee, Florida, or LSU, depending on who has the best team right now. Bryant-Denny's always tough. Sanford's always tough. Jordan-Hare's always tough. And it just fluctuates based on which fan base is most excited and most passionate at that moment.
Yeah.
Do you have maybe a top 3? It might be tough, but just when you go around the SEC places when you're getting an assignment, you're like, damn, I'm going to go to this restaurant?
Oh, we've got them. No, we've got them in every. We've got them in every town. I
Yeah.
mean, just name the town, and I'll tell you the place. Like, we go to Lexington, we're going to Tony's Steakhouse downtown. And see, Tom Hart's kind of like our maitre d'. Like, he's the one that does the reservations. He's the one that says, oh, no, we're going to go here. But we know our same places, like Dragonfly Sushi Joint in Gainesville, we're going. Tom's from Columbia, so when we go to Como, it's more of a, we got to go see this guy or go see that guy, and we got to go do this and that. It's like, all right, fine, we'll go check that out. We go to Auburn, we're going to Acre. Like, David Bancroft's taking care of us. We're going in there. We're eating chicken fried bacon as an appetizer. It's unbelievable. Like, I ate it on the field during COVID. People are like, "Why are you eating food?" Like, it's awesome. I wouldn't. Like, so many people. Like, another thing, Williams-Brice. There's 2 weekends out of the year that they have the state fair across the street.
Yeah.
Like, you can see the Ferris wheel from inside the stadium.
I remember the corn dogs.
We're
right?
eating. Yeah. Well, I wouldn't have done that. Jordan, that was Jordan. But I ate a donut burger, and I ended up eating the whole thing. It was so good. I was going to take a bite, and I'm like, you know what? We went to break, and I'm like, I'm going to finish that. That's actually really good. But why would people be mad about that? I don't know. We're just having fun.
Yeah.
You know, like, people forget football's still fun.
Yeah.
I mean, we try to make it a little bit more fun. We're going to break it down. We're going to analyze, but it's also fun, man.
Yeah.
Like, we watch this because we like it.
Well,
We forget that. We don't watch, and I say this all the time, the SEC, we love to hate more than we love to love.
Yeah.
But we watch it because we like it,
Yeah.
right? We don't watch it because we're mad at it.
Right.
Like, who watches things that intentionally piss them off? Not many people do that. You're sick if you do that. Now, it's going to at times, but we watch this because we love it, man. It's fun. It's
I think
cool.
that's what I like. When you're on the sideline, you're mic'd up, and then you could see sometimes you switch over to fan, and I think that's what we appreciate. I mean, that's why we like your show. It's why they come to our show, because we're fans ultimately.
Absolutely.
So,
And if you're not, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, if you cover something and you're not a fan of it, like, what are you doing?
This is not the line of work.
No.
this is
No, I mean,
You're not
it's,
passionate
yeah.
about it.
and that's the beauty of it. I tell people, I used to say 6 or 7. I guess it's like 9 years. Like, I haven't worked in 9 years. Seriously, since I went full-time media, which I went, and then I had to get out because it just wasn't working. I had a radio station in Huntsville that basically quit paying me. And I'm like, sorry, I got sounds great, but I'm going to actually have to go do something else now. And I went and sold boxes. I hated myself. I went and sold insurance. I hated myself. And then finally I got a call from the different station in Huntsville, went back, then, kept getting some TV stuff, did some videos with AO.com, and it all worked itself out. But, I mean, I haven't worked since I started doing that. It's not work. Like, all the film you talked about earlier, that's not work. I love it.
Yeah.
I would do it all day if I had the time. Like, if I could pause everybody else and watch 3 hours of film, I would do that every day.
Yeah.
But I just got other things I got to keep up with. This is not work.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
I agree.
This was an awesome interview, so I appreciate
Absolutely.
you, Cole. Before you go, I'm sure the audience already knows, but can you tell them where to follow your work?
Twitter @CubeShow, @ColeCubelic, Instagram @ColeCubelic, @CubeShow. The YouTube is @CubeShow61. McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. JocksFM.com, 7 to 10 a.m. weekday mornings.
Right.
I think that's it for now. We'll find some more stuff to get in there somewhere. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
We're just trying to be like you guys. Get the subscribers up and
Yeah.
get the whole thing going. So, but you guys have been a good help to me too, and especially you, Mike. I appreciate you very much. I want to let everybody know that. So, thank you. I enjoy listening to you guys. It's entertaining. It's fun. And then it's some football. Like, that's what it's supposed to be. So,
Yeah.
I appreciate you guys as well.
I appreciate you saying that.
All right, so how great was that? Cole Cubelic, thank you once again. Big fan of his show. Go check out the Cube Show. Cubelic and McElroy in the morning. I mean, that's a great show too. All the work he does. Really appreciate Cole joining the show. And I also appreciate Jesse Simonton. He continues to show up. He's been on the show a number of times. Always a pleasure catching up with Jesse. He's one of the best covering all of college football for On 3. Really detailed interview, and Jesse fired a couple questions back at us. He's one of the few that is man enough to do that down there at Media Day. So let's kick it over to this interview with Jesse Simonton.
All right, we're here with Jesse Simonton on 3, one of our favorites around the SEC. You said we're killing it, man. You're killing it. You're blowing up.
Nah,
You're with
man.
Andy Staples. You're talking to all these coaches. every year it seems like your profile gets bigger and bigger.
He used to be my size. He just has been so damn busy. Look at him. He lost that weight.
I'm just trying to work hard, man. I'm just trying to play my role.
So tell me about this show with Andy Staples. I'm eager to check it out. I haven't had a chance to check it out yet.
Yeah, the debut episode came, the Andy Staples show on 3, debuted Monday, first day of SEC Media Day. So it's going to be a daily show. Andy's the big timer. I mean, it was a huge get for On 3 to get Andy Staples leaving the Athletic. He will be doing a daily show with our website on YouTube. During the season, basically after these media days, Big Ten, these kind of things, during the season it's going to air Sundays through Thursday, so 5 days a week. It'll be on a podcast, simulcast every time, 8 p.m., and so I'll be the regular co-host, and it'll be fun. I mean, we're going to just chop it up. College football is the best, dumbest, silliest, craziest sport there is, and so we're going to have a good time covering it.
Yeah, and I know recently, over the spring and summers, you've been kind of talking to a lot of these coaches, getting prepped for the season.
Yeah.
What's some of maybe the key takeaways from those conversations that you can share?
I think one interesting one, since we're here, because I've talked to SEC coaches, Big Ten coaches, a couple Pac-12 guys. I think, we haven't heard from, as of this recording, we haven't heard from Sam Pittman yet. But I really enjoyed kind of sitting down with Sam and him kind of, reflecting on what went wrong. Arkansas is a tough job. We know that, right? I mean, it's a tough job to win, 9-10 games every year like they, not that they have, but the fact that they won 9 games and then they had that, last year's regression. And the fact that I think he reflected and kind of looked at what went wrong, what did I need to change. He was a guy that really lauded continuity, staff continuity, team continuity.
Yeah.
And yet sometimes, it's kind of like when you're, you hang out with your family a little bit too much. You start
Tell me about it.
you start banging heads, and maybe things can get a little stale, and relationships can get a little frayed, and so the staff chemistry just wasn't the same. The team chemistry, he didn't feel like was where it needed to be, and so you've seen, they got 2 new coordinators. Now, he didn't run off Kendall Briles. He didn't run, Barry Odom got a head coaching job.
Yep.
But I think it was a fresh start. And so we'll see. Arkansas has a brutal schedule, like they always do. They don't play Georgia this year, so the SEC at least gave them, a little bit of leeway there. But I think the fact that he, Sam identified, hey, we need to change some staff stuff. We need to kind of infuse the roster with the transfer portal. Oh, and then what did we do 2 years ago that was successful that I didn't do last season? And he said, we didn't hit.
Yeah.
Because he had this veteran team, he was so afraid of these veterans getting hurt, and so they didn't hit in spring practice and they didn't tackle in fall camp. Lo and behold, they still got hurt anyways.
Yeah.
All these guys still went down anyways.
And had trouble tackling.
And they had trouble tackling. And so that was an interesting conversation, talking with the guys that, I spent some time with the Penn State guys. They really, think that this could be the year. And they kind of have a 2-year window, I think, with this group that they have. They've signed the best 2 recruiting classes. When you're talking about Nick Singleton, Drew Allar, all these studs on defense that they have.
We had someone in here earlier said Drew Allar will be the first pick in 2 years in the NFL draft.
Wow, I mean, I'm running off the top of my head. There's going to be that'd be interesting. He has the talent. I mean, he's a guy that certainly, that howitzer that Joe Milton's got on his right arm. Drew Allar's got one of those too, and they got some studs on defense too.
Yeah.
So those have been some of the kind of the more interesting conversations. Shane Beamer, South Carolina. I mean, he's as optimistic as anybody. And I like Shane. Everybody likes Shane. He is extremely affable, and I think it's just because he is Shane Beamer. I've said, he's not afraid to be corny and silly. And that's not for everybody. There's a lot of SEC coaches that, are not like that. But I think he also is extremely optimistic. Now, we talked about this a year ago. Progress isn't linear. And, I think South Carolina and Ole Miss are two teams this year that may be better than they were last season, and their records won't reflect it.
Yeah.
What's interesting, you said there about Sam Pittman and Shane Beamer. I think the same could apply. I don't know if you really know fully about a head coach, particularly in the SEC, until he's got to make coordinator changes. Sam Pittman lost 2 good ones. Shane Beamer, not so much. But he's made a change nonetheless. I think he had to. Do you think these changes, these hires they've made, could determine ultimately how successful they are at their respective schools?
Oh, yeah. And I make the coordinator, whether it's your first coordinator hire or whoever you have to find as a replacement, history has shown that could be the make or break for your career. Yeah. I am someone that, starting my career covering Florida, when my first year, last year as the editor of the Alligator, before I got to the Miami Herald, Will Muschamp gets hired. He kind of is pushed into, it depends on who you talk to, but he is basically asked to form this kind of union with Charlie Weiss. Destined to fail from the beginning. And that just set Will down a path of hiring bad coordinators where he was almost chasing his tail, couldn't make the right hire, didn't work. And yet, then you've seen a guy like Kirby Smart brings in Jim Chaney, year 1. Identified exactly who he wanted. Chaney was there for a couple of years. Rose Bowl team, makes it to the national championship in 2017. All right, Chaney gets the big payday from Tennessee. Georgia says, that's okay. I think I like this Todd Monken guy. Yeah. How'd that work out? And so, we've seen both examples of getting it right, getting it wrong. Dowell Loggins, I think, probably will be an upgrade for Shane Beamer at South Carolina. We'll see on Dan Enos and Kendall Browse. I like Dan Enos, and I think what he did last year at Maryland with Tua's little brother, was pretty good. And I think you'll have, KJ Jefferson's probably, if it's not Jaden Daniels, KJ Jefferson's probably the second best quarterback in the SEC. Mm-hmm. Rocket Sanders is really good. How many pieces they have at receiver, I think, is a little bit in question. So I think it'll work out for the better at South Carolina. Maybe a little bit of TBD for Arkansas, just because, Kendall, while I think there might have been a little baggage there, Kendall, certainly has the resume that says he's one of the better coordinators in the country.
Yeah. Now, at this event last year, obviously it was in Atlanta, but we do so many interviews.
Right.
You were literally the only one that's you did pick Bama to win the West, but you said keep your eye on LSU.
Well, why'd you have to? You should have said you were the only one that had LSU.
Because no one even had that. I mean, I thought they were 7-5, probably 8-4 at best team. They won the West. Can they take that next step? I'm already out there. I'm saying they're going to win the national championship. They're my pick to win the SEC and the national championship. Is that crazy talk? What do you think about that?
I'm super high on Brian Kelly.
Yeah.
And I think the track record's there. He can be an ornery SOB, but the guy can coach. And if you can take Notre Dame to multiple playoff games, eventually I think he's going to join that list of LSU coaches that's won a national championship. I don't think it's this year. I just think that they're a little bit too thin. Mm-hmm. And I am picking, full disclosure, I am picking them to win the SEC West and to play Georgia again for the national or for the SEC championship game. I will say, and you guys give me your feedback because y'all been talking to a lot of people, listening to these interviews. I will say I'm a little bit trepidatious on my pick with LSU now, listening to Brian Kelly basically admit that they're still trying to close the gap with Georgia.
Right.
Yeah, he's trying to pump the brakes on the hype, certainly.
Yeah.
He is. What do y'all think about that? What do y'all think about it? I mean, that's because you won the SEC West in year 1. Right. I mean, you've reloaded with the transfer portal. You return. They have the best wide receiver room, I think, in the SEC. Really good offensive line. I'm someone, literally wrote a column, go to On3, read about it. I'm someone that thinks that Harold Perkins and Mason Smith, by the end of this season, could be the best 1-2 individual defensive players in the entire SEC. So when you couple all that together, you say, hey, let's go for it. Now it's the present is now.
I think that state is in a unique spot because the women basketball and the baseball just won the national championship. So I think they're all getting swept.
Feeling it?
I think so. And we all know that's got nothing to do with the football, but fans are going to fan. You know what I mean? So I think that fuels into it. Just they beat Nick Saban. They're going to own Nick Saban. Nick Saban and his decaying dynasty, as I like to call it. I think they're over and done with. But no, I do think there's something to that because I think there's little. You always got to read between the lines at this event because they're not going to give you much.
Oh, for sure.
But I think that is one thing, and I've heard him say it. We are a couple injuries away from a rough spot at many positions.
I think too. Some coaches, a lot of them are salespeople, and they got to sell you on a product or a brand. Well, they don't want to come out here and say, hey, we're going undefeated, we're going to win a national championship. You bring those expectations down so then when you exceed them, just like they did last year, I think then you put them on a pedestal again. So I think that's where we are with LSU. I think that they are on the track to get to a national championship, but I just think we're still a couple seasons out, just like you.
But I will say, I mean, maybe some coaches do want to tamp it down. I mean, Kirby came out here today and was like, yeah, we expect to be good.
Yeah.
I mean, so and it's like, yeah, no, breaking news: Georgia expects to win. They've won 29 games the last 2 years. To me, the LSU thing is just a little bit curious, though, because I was at the spring meetings in Destin. I've talked to other, folks around the program. Kelly has really, embraced and enjoyed the fact that they beat Alabama last year. And he has said as much publicly multiple times. And to suddenly be like, whoa, let's tap the brakes a little bit. Go for it.
I mean,
this is a team. They have their schedule's difficult. They got little margin for error now because of the Florida State game. Mm-hmm. You lose that game. You can't lose again.
Right.
So there's some pressure coming out the gate that maybe now that we're kind of, fall camp's just on the other side, maybe they're kind of feeling it a little bit more.
Well, I think for me the thing is, I mean, Georgia, everyone likes Georgia, and understandably, but I think we're already starting to see the signs that maybe life at the top is not so easy. I mean, whether it's attention or any little thing that they do is getting news coverage now, and that's just the way it's going to be. And it doesn't seem to me like they're handling it very well. And I don't think there's anyone in the West that is a clear winner either. I mean, I think A&M. I'm higher on A&M than most, but I don't even have confidence in Jimbo to push that thing over the top.
Well, I'll say this about Georgia first. No one has three-peated in almost 90 years. So the fact that they are considered such like a slam dunk or proverbial like it's going to happen, it is extremely difficult to win back-to-back national championships. Nick Saban's a GOAT, and he's done it once. Nebraska did it. Saban did it. USC did it. That's pretty much been it in any of our lifetimes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that Georgia is kind of, burdened with these expectations of, you can just three-peat. It's really, really hard. At the same time, I think they're as well positioned as any program maybe since Nebraska to pull it off.
Yeah.
Kirby talked about the COVID babies today. 17 of 20 of that COVID class are still on the team. The 18th would have been A.D. Mitchell, who scored a touchdown in every single one of their playoff games and went and transferred to Texas to be closer to his daughter.
Yeah.
That sort of retention just isn't happening anywhere else.
Right.
And when you look at who those 17 players are, it's like key guys everywhere. It's your two starting inside linebackers. It's Kamari Lassiter. It's Brock Bowers. It's Amarius Mims. It's all these dudes that are going to be the foundational pieces on this team. And so I think Georgia has a very realistic chance of three-peating, which just to say that sentence is actually absurd historically.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm flipping and saying, to your point, why it may not happen, some of the off-field stuff is clearly a concern. I think it's less of a distraction than folks are making it. I think that's actually, in my opinion, I think that's a little overblown. They need to fix the damn speeding problem. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It led to a death of one of your players and a staff member. Like, come on, like, get it in order. I think the bigger danger for the Bulldogs this year is unless Tennessee is a little bit better than I think they are, Georgia's probably going to go undefeated until they play either LSU or Alabama in the SEC championship game. And what if it's not necessarily complacency that gets them, but what if they're just not challenged? And then suddenly you do play a good team and you lose that coin flip game you won a year ago against Ohio State.
Like Alabama 2 years ago in the SEC championship.
Yep.
And another way that I break it down that I think could be dangerous to Georgia, everyone's talking about how easy the schedule is. And we all do that, but we talk about it for months and months and months. It may be tougher. I mean, Kentucky could be good. Ole Miss, Tennessee, it could beef it up. But if I equate it to Ohio State, the year they won, and they brought basically everyone back. They dropped one game, the last-second field goal to Michigan State, and they didn't win the conference. They probably were a top 4 team. They were probably a top 2 team, but they didn't have the resume to get in. And if somehow, some way, Georgia doesn't win the SEC, they have a loss somewhere, and that keeps them, I don't think they have the resume to get to the playoff, even though they will be certainly one of the best 4.
So I agree with you. I would say I agree that they wouldn't have the resume. Where I would push back, I would say I would be stunned if the committee left off the two-time national champions and probably a program with as much cachet and a fan base that's going to ride to the moon with them, which is Andy Staples and I talked about this earlier. In that scenario, in that hypothetical, which is fun, we love talking about these hypotheticals and all these different things. In that hypothetical, I think actually Georgia three-peats.
Do you?
Because in that hypothetical, I don't think this team would lose twice this year.
Yeah. You need them to win the SEC championship. Have a game like Ohio State, college football playoffs, maybe you're overlooking. I think that's where Georgia, if we're going to lose, that's where it's going to be. And I don't want to say complacency because that I think that gets played out too, but that's exactly what's going to happen here is they're just going to just tear through this schedule. And then if they do lay out the SEC championship, that first game in the college football play, and I can't believe we're saying that. It almost, it's like we're just throwing out the 12 games that they actually have to play in the SEC, and we're talking about a theoretical.
Don't forget Ball State.
Matchup.
They got Ball State. I think MTSU.
So
they got some good ones.
If they lose one game this year, who's say during the season, who would it be?
I mean, I think the number one pick still has to be Tennessee, just because that game is in Knoxville. Just because I think that's probably in terms of a challenge. That's a scheme. That's a defense that Kirby's had a lot of success, or offense that Kirby's had a lot of success going up against, and it's a lot of the main reason is because Georgia's got studs on the perimeter where you can basically man up, on the outside and then play smaller in the box. But that's still the margins change. That's why I think Heupel's been so successful in 2 years is because you can change the margins with that offense, and so that's an offense designed to pull off an upset. So I would say Tennessee won. After that, I mean, is it at Auburn?
Maybe Ole Miss, Kentucky.
See, Ole Miss. I would be very surprised if Georgia got tripped up in Athens. Could be wrong, but. And again, that's why you say at Auburn, Georgia's dominated that series, though. Since Kirby's gotten here, Georgia's dominated that series. Here's a good question for you boys. You talked about A&M. Third, I think you have them third in the West? Or? Second, okay. You got Alabama. The dynasty's dead. That's right. Alabama dynasty's dead. So I have A&M. I have on my ballot or pre predictions or whatever. I had A&M third. I think it's a favorite flavor of ice cream sort of deal between A&M, Ole Miss, Arkansas. I like Ole Miss this year, but I think the schedule is much more difficult than it was a year ago. What do you think if I said I don't think that I'm picking Tennessee? I picked Tennessee to be second in the East, but what if that really 2 through 5 or 2 through 4 in the East is much closer than people think?
Who would be in that mix? Kentucky and South Carolina, Missouri? Yeah. I'm not buying South Carolina, but I agree with you, Kentucky, and I do think that Texas A&M, even though there's the chance they just derail, but I think they will have a major advantage on both lines of scrimmage when they come to Neyland Stadium. So I think they will beat Tennessee, which will play into that as well, which will hurt them. At Alabama, of course, I got them beating Alabama, get the decaying dynasty. But Georgia, I think Tennessee will have 2 or 3 losses, and one of them will be A&M.
So I know because I kind of shot you some messages, gruffing you and having some fun with you because you're super high on Connor Wegman.
Yeah.
He may not win the job, but you're super high on Connor Wegman. No, he's gonna be the starting quarterback. I agree with you there. It's not going to be Max Johnson. He's had his chance. Now Max is a nice backup option if something happens to Connor. I think A&M's offense will be better because you can't be worse. They were 100th or something in so many categories. I'm curious because you just said defensive line, offensive line. The line of scrimmage is going to be so much better. Those are 2 units that on paper for Texas A&M look really good as we sit here at SEC Media Days and look at depth charts and star rankings and that kind of stuff. That's a defensive line. It's loaded with 5 stars. They couldn't stop a run at all last year. And an offensive line, they really couldn't block all that well either. So you have a lot of confidence it's going to be a lot better this fall?
I mean,
what gives you that? What gives you that optimism? I guess I would say.
Because I think Jimbo is just such a piss-poor CEO, and that I think he's finally shown that he's changing things up, going away from vanilla, bringing in Bobby Petrino. Had he hired Alex Golish, I'm just picking a name, a guy that, he did some stuff, but we all know if it was a guy like that, he'd be running the ship. You don't bring in Bobby Petrino to yank the play calling duties away because he'll walk out that damn door in a heartbeat. You know what I mean? He's bringing in a hard-ass guy that is not going to accept being saddled with you just sit there and let me know what you think of my play calling while you sit on the headset. I think I don't even know. Some people say he had to bring in Petrino like it wasn't even his choice. I don't think that, but I think he knows his job's on the line. I was on Texags. I said, if they don't win 8 games minimum,
fire him.
You got to fire his ass. And they didn't say, but they, those guys, I thought they were going to be like, whoa. They said, he's got to win. That's what they told me.
Well, he does have to win. And, I mean, I don't disagree there. I mean, this is, he's got 75 million reasons to tell him to go to hell, though. I mean, he could say win or, whatever. I'm going to get my money either way.
But I think if Texas wins the Big 12 and A&M struggles, they'll pay that in a heartupbeat.
Well, what's the price of oil at Thanksgiving? I think that's going to be. I think that's going to be the telling thing. If the price of oil is up, then they're not going to have any hesitancy to say it's time for a change. For Bobby, though, I don't know if he can just walk out the door. I think the reason Bobby Petrino accepted this job is because he wants to do what Hugh Freeze does, which is get back into this league. Now, I don't think Bobby Petrino will ever be a head coach in the SEC again. But if he is successful at Texas A&M as an offensive coordinator, he could get a head coaching job in the Power 5 perhaps again. Mm-hmm. The way it ended at Louisville was nasty. The team just dumped on him, just straight quit. The very next year, with the exact same roster, Scott Satterfield won like 8 games. I mean, it was literally just because they certainly had they were like, we don't hate our coach. And so I think if he is given the rope, he can be successful. I wrote a column again at On 3. Jimbo Fisher doesn't know any. Folks were mad yesterday that he was like secretive or coy or whatever. I thought it was amusing. I think how he squirms whenever Bobby Petrino's name gets mentioned. He clearly does not like the fact that as stubborn as Jimbo is, that folks have told him, hey, something has to change. But I am skeptical every time because he squirms so much about Bobby Petrino that he's actually going to really release the reins.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They can cuss each other out all they want. But I don't think Bobby can't really go anywhere. I mean, he was going to be with Barry Odom at New Mexico. It's not like he's flush with options right now. If he's given the rope, I think he can resuscitate a wheezing offense. If he can't, Texas A&M may be in a whole lot of trouble again. That Week 2 game against Miami, huge.
Yep.
And then Week 4, what happens if Hugh Freeze in year 1 goes into A&M and beats them?
It ain't going to be good for old Jimbo.
No.
Last question for you, Jesse.
Yeah.
Why do you hate Mississippi State?
I've
been getting it too. JD, we just had him on, same deal. They're mad as hell down there.
And I get it because they're mad because they feel like they're the Vanderbilt of the SEC. Excuse me.
The perception is.
Hashtag Willy Wonka, scratch that, reverse it. They feel like, yes, the perception is that they are viewed or seen as the Vanderbilt of the SEC West. They are not. They obviously have been more successful. They won 9 games a year ago. I don't think a lot of people know they won 9 games a year ago. Yeah. But this is a new season. Mm-hmm. And, I was there I have covered now multiple former defensive coordinators turned head coaches, and I've seen how that year 1 can be challenging. Challenging for Will Muschamp at Florida, was challenging for Jeremy Pruitt at Tennessee.
Yep.
It was challenging for Kirby Smart at Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's got that thing humming since, but they went 8-5 in year 1. To think that they're just going to continue their kind of upward momentum in the SEC West with the schedule that they play, with the fact that they're kind of you can't fully shift away from the air raid because so much of the roster, they brought in their first tight ends, Ryan Godey and a couple of these other guys, and they don't really have the bigger backs to run as much. But they're going to run a more pro-style kind of hybrid scheme. I think there's going to be some growing pains in that. And I think defensively, they're going to miss Watson at linebacker. I know they've got Jet back, who's a 6-year guy, and they've got, some defensive linemen that they like a lot. Somebody's got to finish last, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody's got to finish last. And it would not surprise me in the slightest if they pull off an upset, but it also would not surprise me at all if there's some real, we had to hire Zach Arnett, and we really like Zach Arnett as our defensive coordinator. But is he ready to be a head coach? I don't know. We're going to find out this fall. And so, they have a tough schedule. Let's see what happens. If they beat us, more cowbell, baby. Yeah. If they win the Egg Bowl again, if they manage to maybe pull off an upset, whether it's an LSU like they did a couple years ago, under Mike Leach, awesome. But it don't mean we hate your team if we pick your team last, it's just you got to rank them 1 through 7 one way or another.
Right.
Yeah.
Just tie them at 6.
And so when they fire Zach Arnett, no, I'm just kidding.
Jesse, before you go, tell the folks where can they find your work.
Yeah, man, you can find my stuff at On3. I'm on the front page almost every day. You can catch me on Twitter at Jesse R.E.'s Simonton. So always happy to catch up with you two. Glad y'all had me on. Love your work. Love your work.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Oh, that was great. All right, most shows would have ended right there because that was 2 outstanding interviews. Really appreciate it from Jesse and Cole, but we got more to break down. Let's start with Texas A&M. That was a big storyline going into media days. Nobody knows what the hell to make of A&M and their new look offense, and you get a feeling that Jimbo Fisher's got a lot more knowledge than he's letting on because everybody was asking him about the play calling duties with Bobby Petrino. He refused to get into it. This is multiple questions. Let's kick it over to Jimbo facing some what should be layup questions, but he is making it more difficult than it really needs to be.
Bringing Bobby Petrino as an offensive coordinator, a lot of experience. He's worked at a lot of different places. I just want to know, entering this first season, what are the responsibilities lie between you and Bobby as far as between play calling, just running the offense?
Well, I'm not going to get into all the dynamics in which we have, but Bobby takes it. He runs those rooms and does those rooms. We're on now, but I'm in offensive rooms. I'm in defensive rooms all the time as a head coach. You have to be because you got what's going on. But great respect. Like I say, Bobby's one of the best play callers, one of the best offensive minds in college football, has for a long time, and quarterback guys. So he and I have a great respect, great work ethic, and it's been wonderful so far. And then I'm not going to get into from a schematic standpoint of what's going on or that part of it, but it went very well, and we're very blessed.
To the specifics of the scheme, but has the offensive game plan been a collaborative effort between you and Coach Petrino, or has it been
Well,
one,
it always
more
is,
one of the
because Bobby and I have went against each other for many years. There's a lot of things he's done I like, a lot of things I've done he's like. We've been friends for years, but then you always do that. Things that work fit your personnel and how it goes, and then we'll work it through, and how we do.
And I have to be honest, because I am high on A&M, but the fact that Jimbo won't go here, that he can't just say, hey, we're giving this to Bobby, it's Bobby's show, and I'm just going to oversee it, just anything like that would be better than this nonsense he's given us. It has me hesitating on my hype for Texas A&M, because I know nothing these coaches say in a press conference setting, it doesn't really mean anything. It's not going to affect the field. But if he can't go this far with why he brought on Bobby Petrino, what in the world's going on there? It just suggests that this combustible nature of this relationship, which I have no knowledge of it being bad at the time or anything, but what happens when the season rolls around? With tricky games like Miami and Arkansas early in the season, I don't know. This is tricky. But what really will matter more than this coaching drama that I'm reading into, may not be drama at all. Receivers. I went on TexAgs during SEC Media Days. I said A&M's got the best receivers in the SEC. Evan Stewart, Anaya Smith, who we're about to hear from in a second, Moose Muhammad, and don't forget Noah Thomas, breakout candidate, and Micah Tease, a freshman. I'm really high on him, hearing great things. Here's Jimbo on just more how explosive this passing game can get this season.
Receiver core-wise, between Evan and Moose and those guys, seems like big playability might be there more so this year.
Well, hopefully it is. I mean, from two things: experience, and I think you have speed, and I think the emergence of Noah. See, Noah was our MVP of the spring. Everybody forgets about him, which, I mean, guys, he wasn't good. He was really good. Now, you didn't get to see him in the spring game because he got nicked up on that first drive in there, but the things he does, the versatility, being in the slot, he can move around. Moose, either as you saw last year, can catch the football as well. Anais' versatility, the things he does. Evan, of course, with uniqueness. And hopefully now you can even take him and move him in different positions to create matchups. And I think that's where the knowledge of those guys can happen. But all those guys have either size or speed or quickness that can create big plays, whether it's going deep or even catch and run things where, in your screen games or your underneath games, and we have. But also Micah Tease, Cottrell. I mean, those guys have done a tremendous job in what they're doing. We had the new Anthony Jordan just came in as a transfer, can really run. There's a great group of guys in that room that can have it, and that's the name of the game. You got to create big plays, and having that ability. And I think as we get better in the offensive line to be able to create time and different things that we are able to do, and experience at quarterback, hopefully we can get that ball down.
Now,
the field.
why I really wanted to highlight those comments, because A&M fans know, I don't think the rest of the SEC realizes how pathetic A&M was passing the football, getting explosive plays. A&M pass plays of 20 or more yards, 89th in the country. Pass plays of 30 or more yards, 111th in the country. Pass plays of 40 or more yards, 104th. I mean, these are pathetic numbers here that Jimbo Fisher's offense put up last fall. We're putting that behind us, though. We're getting high, flying and explosive, because Anaya Smith, certainly he's been coached up here. He almost gave away some trade secrets. He's hyping up his offense. This is better than any Jimbo comments on the offense. Let's kick it over to Anaya Smith, star receiver here for the Texas A&M Aggies.
What can you tell us about how the offense is progressing this offseason, what you've seen with the changes they've made in the last few months?
One thing I'll definitely say is Coach Petrino has come in and, sparked the energy, sparked some light in us, opened up the playbook a little bit more. Not going to speak too much on scheme-wise, but it's very exciting, let's just say so, the least, for sure.
Right, if that didn't fire you up, I know what will. One of our favorites. We went on Feinbaum, said, please, God, the one guy we want to talk to, Billy Liucci from TexAgs, get to the bottom of all this Jimbo nonsense. Let's kick it over. Long interview here with Billy Liucci. Really appreciate Billy spending this time talking some Texas A&M football. And, of course, Texas coming into the league soon. We're here with Billy Liucci, TexAgs, the man himself.
no one better covers Texas A&M, the Tex Ags, and Billy Liucci. You spearhead that thing, so really appreciate you coming by with us.
Absolutely. When you asked me to come on, I was like, hell yeah, I love what you guys do. You know that, and y'all are just entertaining, man, and very, you can get a lot of information. You guys do great at interviewing the guests, but you keep it fun.
Yeah.
And I just love that. Like, especially in this league.
Yeah.
And it's so serious,
Absolutely.
and you got coaches wanting to kill each other and fan bases going nuts, and you guys put yourself out there every week, and my thing is for everyone that goes nuts and gripes and complains, there's hundreds of people that y'all are keeping informed and entertained every day. So keep it up. I just love the way you guys have grown it from just literally the ground up, and it just, y'all are known throughout the SEC now. That ain't an easy thing to do.
That's not always a good thing either.
It is, though. It is. It is. You know that.
Absolutely. Well, hey, man, I'd love to talk about me all day long. But I did, we want to go back to last year.
Yep.
And we're going to go briefly. But it was not a successful season, clearly. But from your perspective, is that something you like? Or, obviously you like to win and everything like that. But, what I'm saying, everybody had their eyes on Texas A&M last year, and it felt like for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
So compared to this season, what is you've had successful seasons, bad seasons, just your perspective of how last year played out.
It's really interesting because really, I won't say all I know, but what I know is A&M football, not only A&M football, A&M sports. I understand like the Aggie psyche.
Yeah.
As you guys, when you just went to a school and then that's what you cover. I've seen it all.
Yeah.
Except championships. I've seen it all. But it is Texas A&M sports teams always, and I think this goes back to just the Aggie and the blue-collar beginnings, the humble beginnings of the university, and everybody going off to war during the world wars and being an all-male military for so long. They just Texas A&M teams seem to be at their best always when they feel disrespected or when they feel like there's a chip on the shoulder and there's something to prove. You go back to Billy Gillespie and some of those best A&M basketball teams. Buzz Williams these last couple of years when they're struggling in the non-conference and they make these runs, and even Buzz's rant last year when they didn't get into the tournament. And Aggie baseball a couple of years ago, they lose to Penn, a series to Penn, and then go to Omaha. When they're counted out, A&M sports teams seem to be at their best. I don't understand. I can't put my finger on why, but it's just been the case.
Yeah.
To lose 7 games last year, they were embarrassed. I know Jimbo was embarrassed in what happened on the field. I know the players, they come in every day. Connor Wigman is sitting there looking at the QB rankings every. He's like, I don't pay attention to nobody. I go, but you are keeping score. He's like, I am. You heard Anias this week.
Yeah.
I'm not happy they lost 7. That was painful to watch. But they were such a young team. I thought they were way overrated, and I think at 6, when you didn't return a starting quarterback, you had a very young O-line, and you were going to play 17 and 18-year-old true freshmen on the D-line. That ain't a winning formula in the SEC. Yeah. I didn't think they'd go 5-7. I thought they should have been ranked in the top 15, not the top 6. The wheels fell off, and I do think a humbled and hungry A&M team should be much improved this year.
It feels like that's the theme, and one of the things that caught me with Jimbo in the big room the other day was the not just accountability from him. Obviously, that's what the head coach has got to say, but he was talking about these boys in the locker room.
Yeah,
and you're talking about the chip on the shoulder. So I feel like that's been kind of the narrative here is like, hey, it's time to put up or shut up.
Yeah. And it is, to your 6. And I'm not saying they have to go from 5 wins to winning the SEC or playing for it, but they have to matter in the SEC this year. They have to be relevant, and that includes big wins. That includes getting out of September intact at Miami, Auburn, early. I think people are saying, well, you'd rather catch Hugh Freeze earlier than late. I kind of disagree. I think early is scarier because there's a lot of unknown, both with their personnel, what they're going to do. I think later teams start to figure them out. The depth catches up. Miami, Auburn, and Arkansas in September. If A&M, and they don't have to go 3-0 in those. They could go 2-1 and beat Alabama, and the whole thing changed. But if they do go 3-0, and I don't care if they're all by 1 point, and I don't care if Arkansas doinks one off the goalpost, and if they go 3-0, I believe they'll be the surprise team in the SEC because I think they're just going to keep getting better, and I think they have depth. But yeah, if they're good enough to win, I don't think those are great teams, but beat 3 dangerous teams, couple good teams maybe in September. I think they emerge as a surprise team in the league.
So I opened this event Monday morning. It was on Texas between David Nuno and Ollie Buchanan, the 2 of the best out there, and we were ready to bury the hatchet. And I was trying to get them going a little bit here, see if I can get you going. And no pushback here. It shocked me. I said if Jimbo does not win 8 games this year, you have to fire his ass. And they didn't say yes.
Yeah.
But they said they didn't say no. And they said he has got to win. So what would you say to that?
Here's what I would say to that. 9 is
short of something crazy happening.
9 is my number where I say if they go 9-3, I'm not, like, hey, I'm really happy with 9 wins in your. But the bounce back, I'll say okay. And particularly, I kind of add that and win a bowl game. 10-3 from 5-7. If they go 10-2 and they're playing in a New Year's Six, it's one of he'll be in contention.
That's
for
about
SEC
what I think they'll
do.
10-2 this year.
If they do that, I think that would be a great year. And I think 9-3 with a bowl win. If you think about the path to get to 9, kind of a couple wins there he'd have to get. I'd be pretty excited. Say, okay, this thing worked. That would probably mean that the quarterback play was good. That would probably mean that the Bobby Petrino thing worked out. 8, I'll tell you this. I would be absolutely shocked. I would not at all expect them to fire him. And it's a contract thing there.
Yeah.
To me, I would be bitterly disappointed in like a 7-5. 8-4 doesn't do much for me. That's getting back to what A&M's kind of been since joining the – and I always argue with people like Longhorns. And, by the way, good luck with them. You're gonna. I got your back, but be ready. That. But A&M's been a good program since they joined the SEC. They hadn't been great, but they've been good. They had in 11 years they've had 2 top 5 finishes. They've won a Heisman. They've beaten Bama twice. They've won 3 of the last 5 against LSU. They have been a good program. I think they're the 5th out of 14 since they've joined.
Top half, no doubt.
But they haven't been great, and you hired Jimbo to be great. You built all these facilities to be great, and if you go by there today, they're building them $200 million more of it. So, yeah, there's an expectation level that's higher than 8-4. But I think it's a nuanced discussion now because of the contract and stuff. And I'll say this, just from talking to Jimbo, he gets that, and he's not happy with how the last 2 years. Somebody said, well, he's probably just, he doesn't care because they can just buy him out. That's not how he thinks. It's not how he got to where he got. I think half the reason he doesn't mention that he's turning over play calling to Petrino, even though Bobby is going to call plays, is because he's just that competitive and that, prideful about it and stuff. And I just think he's like, I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and I'm not going to sit here and explain it. And for better or worse, right? I think we all have our personality traits where you go, well, for better or worse. But, yeah, I don't think there would be change at that. I'd be really disappointed, if they went from 5-7 to 7-5 because there's too much talent. There's too much talent. They've recruited too much talent. There's too much at stake, and it should be better.
Absolutely.
And I want to get to – I don't want to get back to where they were. If they did what you said, if they went 10-2 – to a New Year's Six bowl, I'd say, okay, this is a team that could contend for a national title in 2024, an SEC title. That's what all this money, whether it's to Jimbo, whether it's to the facility, that's what all this is about. They're not doing that just to be the butt of everyone's jokes when they lose to App State. Obviously. So
I want to ask you, because you mentioned Petrino. That's Jimbo better than anybody in this room. And it feels like every time that name comes up, there's a little bit of animosity or something. There's just something. He's just not coming out. Like we had Drink earlier this week. He says, "Hey, I'm releasing this offense to my new coordinator."
Freeze did the same, right?
Why are we not? Why do you think the reluctance? Is it the pride? You think with Jimbo?
I think it's all right. So I don't think it's animosity with Petrino, just from the simple. And I'm not saying they're going to get. Yeah, but I'm not saying they're going to get along perfectly either. I mean,
in big words, I throw them out there.
Me too. You're like our.
They don't always hit.
Our other co-owner Hunter, I always give him a hard time. He just makes up words, so I just call him words that I make up just to see if he starts using them, and he does. So it's pretty funny, but. No, I think obviously in a highly competitive situation, you're going to see camera will probably catch them having words. It might not take more than a couple games, but I think he's so excited about having. I know how fired up he is about Petrino. And don't forget, there's also Jim Chaney's on the staff now as an analyst, and enough people don't talk about that. I don't feel like when you look at his resume and his personality for any, he's an awesome dude. Like he's kind of he's kind of probably the guy that can step between and go. But you think about that room right now, and it's Jimbo, it's Petrino, it's Chaney, it's Steve Adazio, who's been head coach at 3 different spots. It's Coley, who's been an OC at Miami and Georgia. I think Jimbo's having a lot of fun right now. And even talking to like Coley and some of those other guys, I think there's a lot of fun in that offensive staff room where it all seems new and fresh, even though it's going to be very similar schematically. I think things like the formations and the pre-snap motion and the verbiage and the pace of play are what are going to change more than like what they're attempting to do philosophically. So why does he not say it? I don't know. And I think there's some level, and I'm not saying it's the way I would be, but I just think he's just going, I'm not going to tell. It's kind of like Nick Saban with, was it Maria Taylor? I'm not answering, so stop it. I think it's almost like that, and you know how these coaches can be, and I think it's literally like the more you guys ask, the less I'm going to answer. And then he answered it to Feinbaum. I'm like, wait, what? Right before he left. It's like literally on the way out of town, sits down with Paul, and I don't even know that Paul, and he just boom, boom, and that was it.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, what just happened? So I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. I play one on Texas. So.
You mentioned Connor Wigman in quarterback rankings. I don't know if you've seen mine, but I put them out 4th of July.
Yeah.
And what I do, it's different. I'm not ranking them today. I'm projecting where they would rank at the end of the season.
Yep.
I have Connor Wigman as a top 5 quarterback in the SEC. Is that realistic, do you think, with Bobby Petrino, with what I think is the best receiving core in the SEC, with every experience on the offensive line, 5-star running back behind him, he's got all the pieces. Do you think he can be a top 5 quarterback in the SEC?
Yeah, I do. And to me, this is why you're good at what you do. And, there's probably a quarterback that you had 11 that their fan base is raging about. Mm-hmm. But you're looking ahead. You're showing some foresight with that. And you're going out on a limb that other people in the league haven't got. I feel like Connor, first of all, I will say this. Max Johnson had a really good spring.
Yeah.
This dude, threw for 2,800 yards and 27 touchdowns and 6 picks at LSU. He beat Arkansas and Miami when A&M was at rock bottom last year. People are just completely forgetting about him. And even to a fault, I think even sometimes I don't talk about him enough.
Even at LSU, outdued Kyle Trask, outdued Matt Corral. Some big wins for LSU, too.
Yeah, beat A&M, and it was – y'all watch that game. That was all him.
Yeah.
That was no one else on that. That was Max Johnson beat A&M. Mm-hmm. And then literally a couple weeks later, he's transferring. It's so weird today, right? But that battle's not over. I just think Connor's the future of the position in A&M, but he just he's gonna have to go out and win it because Max Max he pushed him all spring. I would call it dead even coming out of spring. But the way Connor finished the year, he's a 5-star himself, and beating LSU. And I know A-Chain ran wild, but go watch that game and some of the throws he made early and late. So the scramble on 3rd and 8 to outrun Perkins. Yeah, he played and he is. He's a winner. He's a dog, and the players know that about him. But look, eight touchdowns, no turnovers last year. Last time we saw him, he's beaten LSU. He had the pedigree. I think he is probably the most slept-on quarterback in the league, your ranking notwithstanding. And I think 5's fair. I think that's somewhere in that 5 to 7 range. And to me, to start the year, I'd have him ahead of a lot of guys that people, have ahead of him. I don't know. If you go back and look at his game against Ole Miss, statistically, it's one of the best first starts by a true freshman in SEC history. And I don't know if it was you that was putting that out. I was shocked to see it. It was something in the 330-something yard range, right? 4 touchdowns, no turnovers, some rushing yards. It was like 400 yards of offense.
He had one
pretty
throw.
Insane.
A guy was about to hit him in the face. Defenders all around Evan Stewart. He put it where only he could do it. It was one of the most impressive throws I saw last year.
Yeah, and it's so much, and that's what I love about Wiggy is it's so much off feel. And he got wiped out in that Ole Miss game. He got hit and really probably knocked out. I think on the next play threw a touchdown to Noah Thomas. He's tough. He's a tall dude. He's probably a little taller than me. I'm a little over 6'2". He's probably 6'3", but he's still had, he's you can tell he's still a kid that played baseball and didn't do a lot of weight rooms. But he is he's tough, but so instinctive. That's the thing I like at quarterback. Be instinctive. Just make plays. When he runs, he's more like Mahomes than Johnny, is he's running to get himself some room to throw it. And he can find guys off schedule, hit them on target, and gets rid of the ball really quickly. So if he wins that job and starts to come into his own, I'm excited about what he can do. Yeah.
We had someone on, Billy, this week. They said, you think SEC fans are arrogant? Just wait till this damn Texas comes into the league.
Yeah.
Can you give us and did you see, they're saying horns down, it's going to be a penalty perhaps in the SEC.
Yeah.
We're not going to let this bullshit fly.
We don't need that shit. We don't need – and I can tell all my Longhorn friends, I got so many of them, even some of the ones on Twitter that we go back, I like it's all in love, but I hate them. I hate I hate Texas, and I hate, but I love the individuals, and so many of them come up to me and say, hey, I battle it out with you on Twitter. It's all in fun, but damn, it's one of those rivals that I hate the thought of losing to them more than I love the idea of beating them. It's that. So the SEC is getting a great rivalry with a lot of hate. And look, you're bringing back A&M Texas. OU Texas is coming in. Texas Arkansas.
Mm-hmm. Probably Oklahoma, Missouri. That'll be a good one.
OU Missouri. And I think you're bringing in 2 of the 3. Egg Bowl will be in there too, but maybe 2 of the 3 best rivalries in the conference are going to be because of this move.
Yeah.
Aggies and Longhorns. And the Red River Shootout at the Cotton Bowl to go along with the Iron Bowl. Right. I mean, that's how big these are going to be. But, yes, they are insanely arrogant. They think they're going to go – see, they think because they almost beat Bama that it's fine. Like, see, that league's nothing. That league's nothing. Well, you almost beat Bama in one game, and then you went and played in the Big 12.
Right.
And you know how many games Bama's almost lost in the last 2 years? Probably like 8 or 9, 10 of them even, if you count the losses and the near misses.
Right.
And they go crazy about A&M and moral victories, and you go, you guys, this is the ultimate moral victory. A&M actually beat Bama a year ago. Well, we had if Quinn Ewers wouldn't got hurt, A&M beat them with a backup court. They will never stop.
Right.
They will never stop, and you cannot beat them enough for them to be, humble or anything like. Think about this. They've ridiculed A&M for the last 12 years being in the league. It's overrated. It's top heavy. You guys haven't done anything. Then they come into the conference, and it's like they're planning the parade and the celebrations, and they can't wait to play at all these places that they've downplayed. The most hypocritical, arrogant fan base in, I would say, college sports, I would say in U.S. sports are the Longhorns. And God bless them, because, like I said, some of my dear friends and some coaches on that staff I have the world of respect for. A couple of them have been at A&M.
Yeah.
Great dudes. But, yeah, man, screw them. I mean, I can't wait. I can't wait till the Aggies and Horns play it. I wanted it at Kyle Field just because you'd rather it be there than not. Right. But it doesn't matter where they play. I didn't want to play them while they were in the Big 12 because I just felt like you're throwing them a lifeline.
Yeah.
You look at their home schedule every year before. Now they're starting to add a big name. But even now, those home and homes are every other year. Yeah. So they play Bama at home. They don't anybody good at home this year. Next year they play, I don't know who it is. If it's Michigan or somebody. The year after that, it's nobody. They wanted A&M in there, so it would be Bama, A&M, Michigan, A&M, LSU. You know, that's how they were teeing it up. Why give them that? When you're in the SEC, you have the recruiting advantage with that. Why give them any help when if you split with them 1-1 or 2-2 over 4 years, they're winning.
Yeah.
Because the record's the same, but they're gaining an advantage by having that big game that they otherwise don't have. You don't need it with all your so I didn't like it then. Now I love it. And now I just wanted it to be a big stakes game. And with both of them in the SEC, it's a level playing field. I think Sark's doing a good job right now.
Is there a particular time of the season you'd like to see these? I mean, do you want this game one opener, or how would you like to?
Do what?
I've heard Thanksgiving's floating
That's
around.
what I like, because as much as the LSU game, LSU fans don't want to call it a rivalry. I'm like, well, I want to talk about that and say, but I'd like it to be Thanksgiving just because of the history of it. And I'm a little bit nervous that in that first game they might try to make it week 1 or week 2 just because it's back. And I could see the SEC saying, man, let's just blow it out.
Yeah.
I wouldn't like that because that early in the season, you know, teams aren't what they're going to become.
Right.
Thanksgiving, both those teams could be, 6-5, and it's a massive game.
Yeah, right.
God forbid if they're both. And by the way, you look at both their rosters, and Sark. I'm giving Texas a lot of shit, but Sark, he's doing, I think, an infinitely better job than Venables in terms of building his roster to be ready for this league, and that's because he's at Bama. Flood's been at Bama. Jeff Banks has been at Bama and A&M. Terry Joseph's been at A&M. He's got a staff that knows, like, if we don't go in there with a certain amount of talent, particularly in the trenches, it ain't going to go well. So I think they're doing a better job. That game could be, if A&M has the kind of season that you think they are and that I hope they do, that 24 A&M Texas game could be among the biggest in this conference, not because of the rivalry, because of, like, what's at stake. So, but LSU, they don't think it's a rivalry. They'll tell you that. All our guys over here will say, we've had a premature Gatorade dump. We've had a fist fight on the sidelines. We've had, Coach Craig Thorpe, who's another Aggie guy and good friend of mine, but the thing with the pacemaker after that game, you had A&M storm the field. You had this year when A&M beats the brakes off of them as they have a chance to, reach the playoff. You have Joe Burrow on senior night getting his revenge and go, 50-3 on A&M, 7 overtimes. Do we need to keep going? Like Scott Woodward leaving, Jimbo Fisher, who they hate, and now he's 3-2 against LSU after A&M could never beat LSU. It's one thing after another. Hell, LSU just hired A&M's pitching coach. I can just keep going. It is absolutely a rivalry, and they don't want to they don't want to call it that, but damn, it's a rivalry. That's why Kendrick Rogers and I do the podcast. We call it the Make It a Cup podcast because they get so mad that A&M made cups, which is silly. I get it. I don't own one of the cups, but they made 74, 72 cups, and I'm going, all right, it is. I wish they wouldn't have just because all the crap we catch, but
yeah,
it was like a historic game. It was like the longest game ever. But still, the Cubs. I know.
It went on so long.
I get it.
He
LSU.
fell asleep. He fell asleep.
Did you?
I did. I gave up. Yeah.
I'll tell you a funny story about that is Johnny. I was down on the field, and a buddy of ours has a suite up there, and it's quite the party suite. So I try to stay away from it during games since I'm working down there. So, but they're up there. Kellen throws the pick, and Johnny is in a race to get to the Chimmy's, the bar. Let's go. Come on, let's go. Interception, let's go. He said as soon as it was in the air, he knew it was a pick. He goes, come on. And everybody left.
Yeah.
They race down to beat the traffic. They get to the bar, and he's like, they don't even know what happened. They don't even know that the knee was down. And they won't let him back into the stadium. And so they're out there watching the whole game, 7 overtimes from the bar and can't get back in. Pretty funny.
I was going to ask for a Manziel story, and you delivered, Billy. Last thing, real quick. Manziel documentary. I know you're close with Johnny. It's coming out. I assume you're in it. And can you tell us anything about that?
Yeah, I'm in it. I didn't know how much. They interviewed me after the first football game last year. It's almost a year ago. Really bad hair, but we're just going to plow through that. I wasn't ready for it. I was like, I had a hat, and they're like, oh, you can't wear a hat. And I'm going, why? I see documentaries, people, but I didn't want it. They were so good, and they're so – I mean, it was an incredible interview. They interviewed me, I think, for like 3 hours, and just – so then they call and say, you made the cut, you're going to be in it. I think I wouldn't say a lot, but I'm going to be in it more than just a quote, and so I'm excited to see it. I don't know where it's gonna go. I know who they interviewed and stuff. I get the feeling, and I have no idea, because I don't know if they would have divulged a little more or not, but I just feel like when you're dealing with those creatives, and they're such cool people, they did such a badass job with the Manti Te'o one. It's the same producers and everything, and so I didn't want to just push the limits of how much I could. I was just grateful that they included me, and we provided them with a lot of footage from Tex Ags. So I think the vibe, what I think it kind of will be is more of a this was this magical little moment in time where everything just kind of came together for this guy. And what was it about that place at that time that allowed this to happen? And I could be totally wrong, but for a player that didn't sniff any professional success 10 years later, he still moves the needle. Yeah. I meant to bring it up to Paul. It was 10 years ago. Where are we going into the 23 season? 10 years ago right now, going into the 13 season, right, was that circus that this place was when Johnny missed the Manning camp or got kicked out of Manning camp a couple days earlier and comes into media day. And Paul would say it, and everybody said the only thing that was comparable was when Tebow came through before his last year at Florida, and it was an absolute circus. And 10 years later, he does still move the needle. And it was so interesting because how he played the game, and to me, like how he went about living his life, and a party life. Let's just call it that. He's not out there hurting. He's like a little brother. I mean, he's a great dude.
We lived it too, just on a different scale.
Yeah, same, right? Everybody does it to scale. I've had plenty of I've had friends that are a lot wilder than Johnny. I've had friends that are close friends of mine that when in their college days were assholes. They were really mean, like beating people up, and so like football people. But Johnny wasn't that. He just pushed it to the limits of having fun, and he understood the access he had at his fingertips, and it kind of coincided with social media. Had he been 10 years earlier, he's not connecting with Drake and LeBron and having people DM him, or he knew I can tweet that I'm going to be at this concert, and there's a chance that artist or their right-hand guy or something are going to message me and say, hey, come backstage, or how many passes. He figured that out real quickly, and that's a lot on a kid that at the time was literally 19 turning 20. So but I think Johnny's I know he's looking forward. He's probably like, I wonder how this is going to play out. I think he's seen it. I haven't even talked to him about that, but I talked to him a couple weeks ago prior, and he's like, it's 10 years in, man. I'm about to be 30. This is the perfect way to kind of close that chapter.
Yeah.
And he's not ashamed of it. He's proud. He's like, that was a legendary run.
It was a hell of a run.
He said that to me. He's like, that was legendary. The legend of that will never die. He's like, but it's 10 years later. He's in a good spot, and he's like, it's a perfect way just to kind of close that chapter for him personally. So I'm excited to see it. I'm really excited about that Florida one too.
Oh yeah, that's be good.
Yeah.
All right, Billy. Everybody knows who you are, but can you tell the audience, in case they don't know, where can they find you?
Yeah, texags.com is our site, and all things A&M. But we talk about everything SEC over there. And again, it's another beauty about this league is everybody cares about everybody.
Yeah.
We all hate everybody. We all love everybody. We all care about. On Twitter, it's at Billy Liucci. Same on Instagram, but I'm kind of boring on there. That's just my little vacation stories or whatever. But yeah, at Billy Liucci on Twitter, Liucci.
I really appreciate it, Billy. That was great.
Next on the docket, LSU, Brian Kelly, championship expectations. At least that's my expectations. Apparently I'm alone on a lot of that after seeing this media ballot. But what is it about LSU that creates so much championships? I mean, Ed Orgeron, obviously, Les Miles, Nick Saban, now the women's basketball, baseball. I mean, that's title town down there right now in Baton Rouge. So what is it about LSU? Here's what Coach Kelly had to say.
Coach, 3 previous coaches at LSU have won national championships. Certainly no pressure, of course. But what is it about this institution that provides, kind of an infrastructure to do that?
Unapologetic commitment to wanting to be excellent, both in the classroom and on the football field. I think a lot of universities sometimes want to apologize for wanting to be good at both, and I don't quite understand that sometimes. It takes resources, no doubt, but it takes, I think, a vision that says we want to do both. We want to be great in the classroom. We want to be great on the athletic fields. LSU wants that. That's the bar. I knew that, and that's why I wanted to be the head coach here.
And speaking of championship aspirations, you're not going to get there unless you beat Alabama like LSU did last year. It's going to be a hell of a lot tougher doing it in Tuscaloosa. But I thought this was interesting. He was asked about, beating Alabama. What's that do for your program? He says, hey, we ain't on that level yet. We're not on the Alabama-Georgia level. We got to go out there and earn it. This is exactly what you want to hear. Because, former LSU coaches, one in particular I'm thinking about, we loved them, but had one great season and went downhill from there. That's not the expectation at LSU with Brian Kelly running the ship. Let's kick it over to him.
Last year, I know last year doesn't matter to this year, but when you beat Alabama football, it certainly matters. How can that win last year in overtime continue to catapult your program and your trajectory going forward?
Yeah, I was asked that question earlier. Look, Alabama and Georgia are the benchmark for what we're looking for. And what is that in particular? It's consistency in performance year in, year out. We did it one time. So we're not in that conversation at this point. So what we're hoping that it catapults us to is a more consistent football program that is competing for championships year in and year out. We don't want any dips in our programs at all. And I think when you look at it from a tangible standpoint, what it did for us is it helps us in recruiting that we don't have to paint a narrative that's not true. In other words, that we can say, look, we're going to compete with Alabama. We're going to be able to beat Alabama. It's not a fantasy, it's a reality. And so there is some tangible evidence there that you can use in recruiting, but the rest of it is really about it giving you momentum for consistency in performance.
And one more thing from Brian Kelly. I thought this was pretty interesting. And I'll tell you why. But according to Kelly, we got 2 starting caliber quarterbacks.
It depends on what you mean by 2 quarterbacks. We're not going to rotate them in and out of the game. Everybody has a different opinion as to what that means. We think they're both capable of being starters. Jaden is our starter, and Garrett will be ready, and we'll continue to prepare him. He got first-team reps in the spring. He'll continue to get those first-team reps. We believe we can win a championship with both of them, but what you won't see is one series this quarterback and another series another quarterback. You saw that in the bowl game, which was a different environment than it would be in, say, an in-season situation.
Now, why is that so important? I think Jaden Daniels is in for a huge breakout season. I don't want to say Hendon Hooker level type season because I don't think it'll be quite that good, but I mean, he'll be in contention for best quarterback in the SEC. He'll be in contention potentially for the Heisman if LSU does as well as I think they can do. But here's a little caveat. Being down there at media days, seeing Jaden Daniels in person, he's a small guy. He's slender. He's about 1/2 of Joe Milton. So he's slippery. I mean, he's dynamic with his legs. He got banged up last year. I think LSU, what we may not realize now, I mean, they may have got the coup of the offseason by keeping Garrett Nussmeier in LSU. He could be a starting quarterback at a few schools in the SEC. I really do think right now they may need him to win a game or hell, multiple games in the SEC this fall. And based on what Brian Kelly had to say there, I mean, I think he would agree with that sentiment. If they asked Garrett Nussmeier to win them a game, I guess an Ole Miss, I guess an Auburn, I guess a Mississippi State, I think he could do it. Now, last team wanted to hit on here, Missouri, of course. They went day 1. Eli Drinkwitz went into this on a mission. He did not want to talk about much. He talked more about Cinnabons than anything fun, or the media there tried to trip him up, tried to get him to talk about Sonny Dykes, talk about this, talk about that. He wouldn't want to do it. But Jesse, who we had on, great question here. The hire of Kirby Moore, why will that pay off? I mean, this is literally probably the hire that's going to define the Drink era at Missouri. Let's kick it over to Eli, talking about the first time ever he's hired an offensive coordinator in Kirby Moore.
Simonton on 3. You made a strong hire in Coach Baker a year ago, and obviously the defensive strides that you guys made were quite notable. What gives you optimism that you've made a similar move in Kirby Moore this offseason for the Tigers offense?
Yeah, I think obviously Blake was just the perfect hire for us in the perfect situation. It's a combination of his personality as well as his leadership ability on the defensive side of the ball to get really 5 guys that had never worked together all on the same page and get that defensive unit to really gel together and buy into his vision. And, when I look at Blake, I see a guy who's going to be a future head coach and a guy who has the it factor to being successful, and just really thankful that our board and AD and president gave him an extension to keep the continuity on our defensive side of the ball. Everybody's uniquely different, and every situation's a little bit different. But I think Kirby, much like Coach Baker, has the right kind of chip on his shoulder with a little bit of an edge to prove something. To prove that he's not just the brother of somebody else, or that he's just been around, some really good offenses, that he can do it. And he's a grinder. He's a great communicator and teacher. So I have a lot of confidence in his organization and the characteristics. And Cruddy's a good play caller, man. You watch. Really the games that I watched were not the games that his quarterback, Jake Haener, was playing. It was the ones when Jake was hurt and he had to call plays without Jake. And you look at those games and you go, wow, this guy really understands how to put a game plan together. And, in the other games I like to watch is when you're a group of 5 school and you got to play a Power 5 opponent. How do you game plan for that? How do you adjust? And, when he was there, whether it was the bowl game calling plays or Oregon State or Washington State or USC, watching those games and how he attacked those defenses and gave his team an opportunity through play calling to win a game, I thought was very impressive.
Coach Sonny Dykes mentioned at the Big 12 Media Days that Missouri was playing in a lot of Big 12 championships and how he hasn't seen that much in the SEC. How do you feel about that?
Well, when he was in Cal, he must not have realized that Missouri played in the SEC championship in 13 and 14. I don't know if he just blacked out those memories or what, but I appreciate Sonny. I don't have any issue with that comment, but obviously Coach Pinkel in his first 2 years, I just want to correct the record. In his first 2 years, played in 2 SEC championship games. So, but other than that, I think this day and age in college football, calling people out for transferring, whether it's transferring jobs as coaches or transferring schools or whatever, is kind of ridiculous. Like, we are. I'm going to stop. Cause I'm going to stop. So SEC, they played in just as a point of clarification for Coach Dykes, Missouri played in the SEC championship in 2013 and 2014.
Thanks, Coach.
MIZ.
Well, I'll tell you who else has got a chip on their shoulder. These Mizzou fans, they're so great. They're all up in our mentions. That's basically was the message of media days for some reason. Arkansas, South Carolina, on and on and on. Disrespecting the Missouri Tigers. That whole fan base got a chip on their shoulder. So those comments should be music to their ears. Their new offensive coordinator, he's coming in here on a mission to prove himself, just like Blake Baker did last year, just like Drink's got to continue to do if he's going to keep that job at Missouri. And that is something we hit on with Jarod Hamilton from Power Mizzou. Jarod Hamilton, Power Mizzou, here covering them Tigers.
Yeah.
What's one thing you want to learn from Drink at SEC Media Days?
Man, there's a handful of things I want to know. And everybody obviously wants to know what's the situation with the quarterbacks at this point with Jake Garcia, Sam Hornet, and Brady Cook. And we're probably not going to know that until a little bit later in fall camp.
Right.
But I want to know what's going on with the offensive line situation. They've got so many moving parts there, so many new players playing out of position, whether they were on the bench last year or they're transferring in. They got Cameron Johnson, all AAC player coming from Houston. Mm-hmm. He got the honor as a left guard. He'll be moving to center. They hope to have him be the starter. They've got Armand Membu, who was a true freshman last year, who played really well at right tackle. They're going to move him to right guard. And then they got Marcellus Johnson from Eastern Michigan. He had, I want to say, like 32 starts at Eastern Michigan. They're going to move him to right tackle, obviously, because they got Javon Foster as their mainstay. Yep. Left guard will be the position where it's like a true position battle between Xavier Delgado, who was the starter last year, and EJ Ndoma Ogar, who was playing really well at right guard. He started a couple games, but he had like a lower leg injury that cut his season short. So I'm just interested to know how the line is coming together and how those players playing at different positions this year are doing so far.
What, do you think new offensive line coach helps or hurts? It may be tough to say till we know the offense too.
Yeah, we're gonna have to see a little bit of fall camp. We're gonna have to see the first couple games to really understand it. But having Brandon Jones come from Houston and then Cameron Johnson, come in a couple weeks later after him, that definitely helps. And I don't know, maybe it's a situation of just having some new blood in there, kind of rejuvenate something, or they find out something maybe they couldn't get together, last year or something like that. But maybe we'll find out, first couple weeks of the season.
I don't know if you've seen it from Cousin Shane, but he's saying 10, maybe 11 wins. How would Power Mizzou react to a 10-win season in Columbia?
Oh, man, you're going to get people to hate me, man. I'm going to be honest. Every time I see the schedule, it's between 6-6 and up to 8-4.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm probably at 7-5. But my thing is, I think Kansas State, that's a game I have as a loss right now. Mm-hmm. And that's only because I don't know the quarterback situation with Missouri. Right. But Kansas State lost so many good players they had, whether they went to the draft or whatever it may be. They're kind of reeling. That doesn't mean, Chris Kleiman doesn't have new guys in there who can play, but they just lost so much talent. If I knew the situation at quarterback this year with Missouri, I think Missouri can win that game. I think it's a much more winnable game than maybe it was last year.
What's the biggest rivalry for Mizzou fans, you think? Because Arkansas, I know they don't want to claim it, but it feels like a rivalry to me. What do you think for Mizzou? Who's their biggest rival in the SEC?
It's Arkansas.
Yeah.
And the thing about this, and I wrote about this earlier in the offseason when they were throwing out the 9-game schedule and things like that. The reason I wrote Arkansas, like that was my first one, is because that's a rivalry that's spread outside of football. They take that very seriously in basketball too, and in other sports. So no matter what, some of the fans are saying, it's really their biggest rival right now. That's who they're going at all the time.
Mm-hmm. Are you convinced that Drink is the right man for the job?
We're still finding that out. There's just always something wacky or something that just goes awry. Like last year, I believe they could have went 8-4.
Mm-hmm. Beat Auburn.
They should have definitely beat Auburn. I think the Kentucky game, they were coming back. I mean, they struggled in that first half. Brady Cook struggled in that first half, but he's the reason they got back and why they took the lead at one point. And then you had that weird block punt situation going on where it was a flag, and
that was stupid.
That was weird. And so that's 8-4, and that's not even counting the Georgia game where they were leading most of the way and they had it in hand. Although with Georgia, it just felt like it's Georgia. At some point, they were going to find their groove and they were probably going to win it. But that was, again, another game where they were in it. So talking about an 8-4, potentially 9-3 team last year, even though their record says 6-6, I think they're better than what people say they are.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you. Everybody knows Luther, and I love it, and I hate that he left. But who's somebody we should be keeping our eye on to step up and kind of play that role?
Oh man, it's still Luther. But here's the thing with the wide receiver position. This year, I feel the team is much more happier what they have in the group as a whole. Last year was a lot of trying to put a square peg in a round hole. They had a lot of people kind of playing out of position because they had, 3 of their top 4 receivers were slot guys: Barrett Bannister, Luther Burden, and Dominic Lovett. Lovett, he excelled in the slot last year, and Luther, he's so talented, you just got to get him on the field. So they played him outside, and then Barrett, when he was in the rotation, he got in the slot because that's just where he was best at. Now they moved Luther into the slot. They brought in it's slipping my mind. Theo Weiss. There we go. He's going to play outside, and I think he averaged like 19 yards per reception last year. Lovett averaged 15.2 or something like that last year, and he was the team's deep threat. So they got somebody who can stretch the field. They got Dennis Jackson, who used to play at Ole Miss. They believe he can play outside, he can play inside, and he's kind of like his playing style. I'm not going to call him that, but his playing style is similar to Luther, as in they want to give him the ball in space. Those are players they want to get in space and let them do their thing when they get out there. They got possession receivers like Mekhi Miller. He was a true freshman who there was a couple times last year when Barrett Bannister missed a game or something like that, or they needed a big third down. He came through in the clutch. Mookie Cooper, another person who can stretch the field. They got so many pieces there, and I haven't even got to maybe some of their the recent signing class. They got 4-star Joshua Manning, who may be able to squeeze in there and get a couple snaps and things like that. And I'm sure I'm missing some people, but they're much more comfortable with the depth in the wide receiver room and how the pieces fit into those positions. Mm-hmm.
Do you think Missouri's got the running back to excel this season? Because, Drake's had some great ones. Beatty, Roundtree, and I think even at Appalachian State he had a really good running back. Did his scheme make those running backs, or did those running backs kind of make the scheme? What do you think?
Oh, that's a good question. We're gonna figure that out this year. I think they got Cody Schrader. I believe he's gonna be the starter. He's just Mr. Consistency. Right. He may not break off a 40 or 50 yard runner type of guy, but what he won't do is he's not going to get tackled for a loss too many times. They had a kind of a problem with that, not just with the running backs, but the wide receivers sometimes too. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it was just honestly too much dancing behind, trying to make people miss and all that. Cody Schrader's always going to lean in and get you a few yards. He's always going to get you, 3 or 4 or 7 or 8 or something like that. He's consistent. Nate Pete, he's that guy who he has the breakaway speed. He can make plays on the outside and things like that. He just had a couple of fumbling issues last year and, the tackle for loss things. But someone that, maybe you can kind of see getting some snaps early on is actually a recent 3-star signee, Jamal Roberts. So they're kind of high on him. And they still got former 4-star Tavares Jones in there. So that running back room, you're going to see those guys actually get some snaps because after this year, Schrader and Pete are gone. So it's still going to be a by committee thing, but expect Schrader to start and the other guys to kind of complement him.
Do you think the pressure's on with Drink? Yeah, I mean, it feels like this should be a year. Now, I'm out here. I said 10. I don't know where 11, I think I retracted that one a little bit. But I think 10, best case scenario, stars align. That's what they got there in Mizzou. I love their defense. I love this secondary. You may have the best secondary in the country. So does that create more pressure? I know he just got an extension and everything, but that doesn't mean anything in SEC football. It feels like this is the year that Drink's expected to take that next step. Don't you agree?
Yeah. I would say this, though. I don't think it's like if he goes 5-7 or something, I don't think it's necessarily a firing. There's context, and something Drink said a lot last year is, progress isn't always linear. So, like, context, when I mentioned those games they lost last year, I mean, if you just look at the record, you're like 6-6, 500 again. But if you watch the games and you know what happened, you're like, okay. Like, some of that stuff isn't really – what can you do about, your superstar kicker missing a 26-yard, chip field goal or, the bunt, block punt thing where no one kind of really knew the situation going on. So things like that, you got to play that into it. But
maybe one of those goal line stands that they punched it in against Georgia.
Yeah. Well, that was a big thing with the offensive line penalties as well as how many tackles for loss. I just said it was, the running backs and wide receivers had a part in that. A lot of that had to do, with the offensive line. They were. I cannot remember the exact placement. I want to say like 118th in the FBS in tackles for loss allowed last year. They allowed 7.88, and so 91 for the regular season. So that's a lot of tackles for loss. But back to your original question, they do need to 7-5. Like, that's not that great, but that's where it's looking like, all right, we've got to see the next step in wins this time. But I think for me, 9-3 is kind of like that's the dream scenario for them. 8-4 is kind of like this is a good one, but I've got them at 7-5 right now.
What's your confidence level that the defense can still be the strength of the team with inexperience at defensive end? Last year we had Isaiah McGuire on. I mean, that was our guy. He was arguably the best player on the team last year. He's gone to the NFL. How big of a concern is that for this defense?
Defensive end that will be something that I'll ask about. It doesn't seem like there's quite a couple guys where they're certain where you're just like, okay, this person's going to step in.
Yeah.
But they bring back 8 starters on the defense, and to me, I always kind of basically include 9 with Dalen Carnell because he played about 45% of the snaps as a redshirt freshman, and he led the team in takeaways with 5. He had 3 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries. So
does his dad DM you too? He DMs us all the time. He's a great guy.
He's a cool guy for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you basically got 9 starters coming back.
We count them too.
Yeah,
we count them.
Yeah. So I think the defense is in a good spot, and I think the biggest thing I want to know is kind of. Last year, Blake Baker said when he came in, he kind of learned the defense they had in place. He didn't make everybody learn. He thought that was it just didn't make sense. So let him learn what they've got going on. And this year, how does he sprinkle that in? And with the defensive ends and kind of not knowing what you got as far as a pass rush, I wonder, does that mean more blitzes, from the linebackers or what you're doing with the safeties or whatever? And how much more will you lean on the secondary until you know exactly what you got at pass rush? Because they said something – I've heard some things about Darius Robinson possibly starting at defensive end from defensive tackle. If anybody's going to do it, it'd be him. But, how is that going to work,
What's one game you think Missouri fans want the most? That's maybe realistic. I'm not saying everybody wants to beat Georgia, right. but of course they gave Georgia the best game, so you could include that. But is it Tennessee after they kind of ran up the score, Arkansas, Kentucky after that stupid punt, Kansas State? I don't know. What's one game you think Mizzou fans want the most this fall?
Because it's the closest one of all the ones you named, probably Kansas State.
Yeah.
That rivalry with the state of Kansas. For those who didn't know, I was born in Kansas. I was born 15.
So that's more personal.
Listen, and I try to tell people this all the time. So I was born 15 minutes from Kansas State, but I'm an Army brat. I lived everywhere. I didn't really live there too long. I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina. So that's where I say I'm from. So, but people hear I'm from Kansas, they just assume all this stuff about me. I'm like, I don't care. I really don't. But that beef they got with the state of Kansas, so that includes Kansas State, they want that win, and that's going to kind of help determine how their season goes, because that non-conference schedule, or those first 5 games you include
Yep.
Vanderbilt, people are saying they should go 4-1. If you win that game, they go 5-0. So
Right.
they got to get off to a quick start before they kind of get into that gauntlet.
Yeah, and that goes back to Shane. He's talking about the pressure because, man, we're seeing it. I know you're seeing it at Power Mizzou, but fans they expect to go into LSU 5-0. And like you said, at worst, 4-1. Maybe if Kansas State's really good again. And they're saying, hell, LSU's never won it for – I mean, I've heard that 20 times, probably a week the last 2 months. It sounds a little bit like you're saying, let's pump the brakes a little bit here. I mean, you don't want to step on people's enthusiasm.
No. I'm not saying they have to necessarily pump their enthusiasm, but my job is to be a realist.
Yeah.
You know,
that's not our job. We just 10-0, 11-0.
I'll drink to that.
Now, just being us. Well, okay, so I'm curious to know. You said 11-1 or 10-2. What are those?
10-2 is like perfect season.
Okay, what's those 2 losses for you? Is it Georgia and LSU?
No, actually, it was. I went Georgia, and then I went back
Tennessee.
and forth to LSU and Tennessee.
Yeah,
one of them.
He says they're going to beat one of them.
Yeah.
You think they're going to beat Tennessee?
Well, I think it's it's one or the other.
Oh,
so
okay, I got you.
LSU or Tennessee.
Okay, I got you. Now, for my money, I think. I think what did I say with the score was I wrote about it the other day, like a combined score of like 140 or 124 or something to 48. That's how much Tennessee has outscored Missouri the last 2 games.
Mm-hmm.
So that seems like some type of puzzle they just can't get right. So I wouldn't pick Tennessee right now. But different year, that really is kind of irrelevant to this year. But it's hard to go off history that they could do that.
I just think the reason I was kind of leaning toward Tennessee is Tennessee they struggled when you had lockdown corners. Mm-hmm. And I think there's only a handful of teams that really could lock down Tennessee's wide receivers. The problem they ran into last year was just the depth. You guys just couldn't go the distance. And then once the floodgates open, now I feel like you got a little bit more. That's why I was kind of leaning toward that one, because you guys are a little bit deeper this year. And that I think that depth is going to be the one, like if you're picking one. LSU, I don't know. I just think
LSU, that could just be nothing but height. So a lot of teams crumble with height. And they play Florida State right out the gate. They play, I think, Mississippi State and Arkansas before that. I mean, they got some landmines there.
Yeah, well, they all do. I mean, it's the SEC. You never. I mean, shit, they about beat Georgia. You know, so I mean, there's landmines all over the place.
Right.
I think a lot of people sleeping on Mizzou this year. I think they sneak up and they're going to surprise somebody. There's going to be a signature victory this year. I just feel it.
Yeah.
It may be Tennessee, maybe LSU, maybe Georgia. I don't know, but it's going to be somebody.
Yeah.
And it better be Kansas State, right? That one, because I like how your schedule starts, and that Kansas State just sitting there so early can derail that momentum, I think. I think that's a pivotal game, man.
Yeah, I mean, they get that 5-0, and they beat the reigning Big 12 champs, and that's obviously, like I just said, the big state rivalry thing going on. They're feeling hot, really good with that confidence going into facing LSU. So it'd be interesting to see.
I'm going to give you a layup to end with. Let's say Kansas was on the schedule this year. How many points does Missouri win that game by?
Yeah, you said it's a layup, 100.
Yeah.
That would actually be a good game, though.
Yeah.
Because Kansas wasn't. Were they 6-6 last year?
Yeah, they went to a bowl game.
Okay.
They lost to Arkansas.
Yeah, they played the Liberty Bowl, right? So that'd actually be a better game. But realistically, I think Missouri could probably win that game by maybe a touchdown, 10 points or something like that. I'm feeling it.
And then,
no, I think
40 by the end.
I think it'd be a little bit more high scoring that people would expect, but it would be a good game.
Trust me, nobody on this podcast likes Kansas, so you're good.
All right, Jarod, I really appreciate you. Before you go, tell the audience, where can they find all your work?
All right, you can follow me on Twitter at Jarod C. Hamilton. Follow my work at powermizzou.com. I actually just dropped my first long story type of thing on the 2013 Mizzou team that went to the SEC championship. Got to talk to James Franklin, Marcus Golden, USC offensive coordinator Josh Henderson. He just helped Caleb Williams get the Heisman. So I got to talk to a lot of people, and it appeared to be a great season. I love doing the research for that article.
All right, well, check it out, man. Thank you so much.
All right, so this is going to be one hell of a long episode, so I'm cutting it here. That's all we got on this episode of the show. We are going to be absolutely loaded all week long. Shows like this, tons of interviews. We got to get to them. SEC Media Days Rewind continues all tomorrow. I appreciate each and every one of you for showing up. We'll catch you on the next one.